I recently came across a podcast by Chris Williamson that featured Greg McKeown. He had written a book a while back called Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less. This intrigued me because I'd been always trying to cram more things into my day, rather than embracing the adage, less is more. I agreed with Yngwie Malmsteen that more is more.
It's very simple. It's very simple. And he kept on telling me to slow down. I said, hey, slow down. Remember, less is more. Less is more, he said. And I always said, how can that be? How can less be more? It's impossible. More is more. Simple logic.
Greg McKeown talks about cutting away things that don't really make that much of a difference and choosing the things that do matter. This isn't just about getting more things done, but rather about making the most out of life. Too often we find ourselves just existing and not really living. Essentialism changes this by asking, will this activity or effort make the highest possible contribution towards my goal? This is a question learners of Japanese should also ask themselves, as there are so many distractions all around us in the modern world. The reason you would like to learn Japanese most likely has to do with you having an interest in Japanese culture, but this interest can also drive you off course. If you love anime, for example, but you're not at a sufficient level to learn from it, then just binging anime won't help you improve your Japanese that much. In this video, we'll cover how you can make use of the principles outlined in Essentialism to improve your Japanese, as well as give you more of what you crave from life. The wisdom of life consists in the elimination of non-essentials. Remember to like and subscribe and share the video with someone who you think might benefit from it. And also comment below for the algorithm. As with most things in life, not everything is equally valuable. This is exemplified in the Pareto principle. This principle is named after the Italian economist Wilfredo Pareto, and states that 80% of consequences come from around 20% of the causes. This means that there isn't an equal relationship between input and output. Pareto came to this realization after observing the imbalance of land ownership in Italy and how a minority of landowners controlled most of the land. This does of course not always apply perfectly to all situations, but it fits remarkably often. In fact, there's sometimes a second Pareto principle at work within the first one, meaning that the top 20% can be further divided into the top 20 and bottom 80, giving you a top 4%. Rather than just being used as a tool to understand the distribution of results, the Pareto principle is a good philosophy to follow. Knowing that a small percentage of what you do will give you the most of your results will allow you to get a lot more out of life. If, for example, you get most of your enjoyment from around 20% of your free time, then you can probably increase the quality of your life, what you enjoy doing the most. You might think that you will do better trying to do a lot. This isn't always the case. Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in the world, for example, credits 90% of his wealth to only 10 investments. Instead of spreading himself thin, he would spend a long time before deciding on an investment. Instead of following the saying of not putting all his eggs into one basket, he would do just that but guard the basket with his life. This is in part what Essentialism is about. Greg covers this principle in the book through the phrase, less but better. The phrase comes from a story about Dieter Rams, who was a lead designer at the German company Braun. He was famous for trying to filter through the noise to find the essential. One time he was asked to collaborate on a record player. Back then, record players were covered in huge chunks of wood and thought of more as another piece of furniture. Rams revolutionized the design of this player by removing the non-essential, ending up with a much smaller player with a plastic top and a lid, and not much more. This design gradually became the standard. The principle of essentialism was also applied with great success in post-war Japan. In 1951, Joseph Moses Juran, in his Quality Control Handbook, covers an idea which he calls the law of the vital few. He explains that you could massively improve the quality of a product by solving just a small amount of problems. Japan adopted this principle after the war, and this helped Japan with its economic miracle and recovery. By improving those things that really matter, they turned "made in Japan" from a phrase that people associated with badly made products to one of quality. Another important quote from the book that stuck with me is from John Maxwell. He said that you cannot overestimate the unimportance of practically everything. This means that as long as you can figure out what the essentials are, you can really improve your life by doing more of what really matters. Small changes in everyday life can have a huge impact in the long run. This, of course, has to be applied consistently for you to feel the effects. Repetition really shouldn't be underestimated. You can't learn Japanese in a single session. Another way to think of essentialism is putting the ladder up against the right wall. There's no reason to climb as hard as you can if the ladder is up against the wrong wall. Essentialism is really something that can be applied to all aspects of your life. Ask yourself if what you're doing is really valuable. Are you really spending your time on what's most important to you? Watch the video to the end before clicking on anything else, by the way. But think about this, are you getting the most out of life right now? If not, what are the steps you can take to get there? What works best for you will of course depend on who you are and what you want. But for me, the following things are what worked the best for me when studying Japanese. Kanji is a huge leverage for me, so I recommend that learners focus on kanji and learn them early. This will really accelerate your growth. Another important point is to get in as much listening and reading as possible. The more input you get, the better you will become able to understand what sounds natural in Japanese. And this is huge. The third important point is working on your pronunciation. Listen and repeat out loud and try to sound as close as possible to the Japanese speaker. The fourth point would be consistency. Staying consistent is ultimately what will have the most impact, because if you don't study, you will never learn. Some examples of low leverage activities could be just watching anime and thinking that you will learn, without ever applying the new words or language you encounter. It could also be just reading grammar without getting a feel for how it's used in real life. Another low leverage activity that causes a lot of problems is studying without focusing 100% on what you're doing. Multitasking can, at worst, be hardly better than not studying at all. Essentialism can also apply to learning Japanese in other ways as well. Enjoyment-wise, what had the most impact for me was getting to know Japanese people. Traveling and experiencing new things in Japan are also high up on my list. If this sounds like something you dream of doing, then start aligning your life so you will reach this point sooner rather than later. Remember that you need to take control of your own life to steer it in the direction you want to go. Essentialism is a mindset that can help you achieve just that. To see how sleep can affect your productivity when learning Japanese, watch this video next.
It's very simple. It's very simple. Simple logic.